Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com. Although I've got nothing on this reporter who's joining us here on the show today. His name is Sam Fortier. He is the Washington football team beat reporter for the Washington Post. And no, not Adam Schefter. No, not Ian Rappaport. Sam Fortier was the one who broke the news about Morgan Moses to the New York Jets. So we had to get him on video. We had to get him here on the show. So let's bring him right in. Sam, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Paul.
So, Sam, how does that feel, man, that you broke the story that Adam Schefter is like Morgan Moses to the Jets, first reported by Sam Fortier? I mean, that had to seem pretty cool, man.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, I uh, I was looking actually the other day, and my first account that I ever followed on Twitter was Adam Schefter. I think I made it back in like 2010, 2011. So to get the shout out from him, I mean, I'm a reporter too. This is what I do. I try to make sure that I take care of my business, and I want to be first. I expect to be first. But to get that shout out certainly was pretty cool.
That's what I'm talking about. So let's dive right in. You broke the story, Morgan Moses to the Jets. So I want to start back at the beginning, though, because this is interesting because, Morgan Moses is released back on May 20th, over a month ago. And it's interesting because, like, again, and we're going to dive into a lot of different pieces of this, that it seems like the Washington football team ended up releasing him because they failed to find a trade partner, and that seemed to be where they were kind of leaning there. So let's just go from this question. It starts off: how did we go from wow, he's been the starting right tackle for like the last 6 years to all of a sudden he was on the streets?
Yeah, so I think the failing to find a trade partner was a little bit of a what's the phrase, fait accompli, or it was kind of a, they put it out there, and I think they realized that nobody was going to go for it once they said, oh, we'll release this guy if you don't trade for him. There was no incentive for anyone to give up assets for a 30-year-old who, while he's played 97 straight games, started 96 straight games, has had some injury problems. He played through a torn adductor. Actually, I think he tore it in week 2 last year, and he played through it. So, I don't think anyone was going to give up assets. But basically, we get here because I think when you start to look at the timeline of what the Washington football team hopes to be when they hope to start competing in the next 2 to 3 years, you're not sure if Morgan Moses can be your right tackle of the future. And you don't expect Charles Leno Jr. To become available. The Chicago Bears released him. So you sign him. You can play him at left tackle. You draft Sam Cosmi, who you had a first-round grade on, but you get him in the second round. And you want Sam Cosmi to play sooner rather than later. So if you're the Washington football team, you're looking and saying, okay, we got to find out what we have in this Cosmi kid right away. Morgan Moses is obviously not the kind of guy that I think would that's not the kind of guy who expects to be benched. So when you start looking at that, you say, okay, what are our solutions here? We have depth, we have affordable depth right now. We can plan what we're doing going forward. So even though I think he's arguably coming off the best season of his career, but it just made sense for the Washington football team to move on from him at that point.
Let's go into your report because it was fascinating. From what you suggest in the report, Moses didn't ask for this. He didn't ask to be traded. He wasn't even apparently looking for a new contract. So, from that standpoint, that's kind of weird, especially a guy that, I know Ron Rivera's coming in to try to establish his own vision, his own culture. I mean, but this guy was a cornerstone of the franchise, dare I say.
No, absolutely. I think that's right. And when you're Ron Rivera and you talk about rebuilding the culture, a culture cornerstone, I mean, he was one of those guys. But like you said, no, I know for a fact that he didn't ask for a trade. He did not ask for a new contract. Those things are 100% true. And Ron Rivera just decided to move on because he looked in the future and said, okay, we're not competing for a Super Bowl this year. So while and we don't know what Morgan's play will be, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, he just decided to make a short-term decision, which he hopes will pay off in the long term. That's really why that decision was made. But obviously, I think Morgan's market probably wasn't as robust as he would have liked. I think that the teams interested were obviously the New York Jets, the Chicago Bears, and I think there might have been a little bit of interest from the Denver Broncos, though I'm not sure how strong that was.
So let's dive into that because when I saw Morgan Moses release, first off, I did a discount double check, like Aaron Rodgers. Who? Morgan Moses? Whoa, okay. All of a sudden he's available, and then I'm like, well, this guy's about to get scooped in 5 seconds. Look at the resume. We've mentioned it throughout all this: 96 consecutive starts over the last 6 years. So I went, wow, this is going to happen quick. But fast forward a month later here, Sam, and He took his time, it seemed, over the course of a month plus before settling on the Jets. In what was the holdup here?
Well, I think if you're Morgan Moses and you're turning 30 years old, you got to think to yourself, what do I want to do? Because when you hit the market uh, in the summer after free agency, after the draft, there's usually not a lot of great offers left. Usually, most teams have spent most of their money. So I think if you're Morgan Moses, you got to say, okay, do I want to try to get a 2 or 3 year deal, lock myself in somewhere, and set myself up to get, kind of ride it out and hope maybe this is my last contract, or do you want to get a 1 year deal, try to hit the market sooner? I think sifting through those options, kind of weighing and judging how do I want to play this? Because obviously, when you've been 6 years, 7 years with one team, it really is important to set yourself up in the next scenario correctly. So I think weighing those options, who's willing to give a 1 or 2 year deal? What are those 1 or 2 year deals entailing? As we see with the Jets, he has that pretty significant bonus if he plays 80% or more of the snaps. So I think it's just working out all of those details is why probably this took so long.
Let's get into the contract lingo here because, as you said, it's a 1 year deal for 3.6 million. It could jump up to 5.6 if he plays at least 80% of the snaps. And as you noted in your story, he's played like 90% plus of the snaps if you translate it over like his career. So yeah, it seems like pretty likely gonna get that nice bump there. But it's from Jeremy Fowler's portion of the reporting. Apparently, the Jets put a strong 2 year offer on the table, and Moses is like, I'm good. I'll just take the 1 year. So that's interesting that he chose that. Is that just to what you're saying? Hey, 1 year deal, good opportunity here with the Jets. Then I could just dive back in next year and get a bigger contract?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, when Jeremy Fowler says strong offer, I'm not exactly sure what that means. To me, it
Sure.
it it, it sounds it sounds like, like basically if I were Morgan Moses and it was like, okay, you can come to the Jets on a 2 year $7 million deal or a 1 year 3.6 with the ability to get up to 5.3. I'm probably going to take that 1 year deal because if you're Morgan Moses and you want to bet on yourself and say, okay, I think I have 2 or 3 good years left in me, I want to capitalize on those 2 to 3 years. And if you look at, the Baltimore Ravens signed Jawan James after he suffered that season-ending injury, right? So I mean, that's a huge. I think he signed for 8.5, 9 million. That's a big bump. So if I'm Morgan Moses, I say, okay, you know what? I'll take that 1 year deal and I'll hit the market next year.
I mean, you just got to respect the ballsiness of a guy who's like, you know what, I'm betting on myself. And we saw Kirk Cousins, another guy in Washington, that seemed to pay off for him just a couple of years ago. Again, we're speaking with Sam Fortier, the Washington football team beat reporter for the Washington Post here on the show. Sam, why the Jets? Okay, I know this is a YouTube channel for Jets fans, and they're like, "Oh, this is great," and they're popping the bubbly, and this is phenomenal. But why the Jets? They were 2-14, and I know there's a couple other teams interested. I mean, Moses chose the Jets in this free agency, late free agency ad here.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take the two teams we know for sure were interested in Chicago and New York. To me, it is a much safer proposition to go to a place, especially on even though it's a 1 year deal, it's a safer proposition to me to go to New York where Robert Saleh is going to have a lot of leeway. He's going to have a lot of, I guess, latitude in this first year to try to establish what he wants to protect Zach Wilson. Rather than going to Chicago, which while they did just draft Justin Fields, I think if you're Ryan Pace, the GM, you got to be looking over your shoulder in Hollis Hall because things have not turned out the way that I think. I think he's on the hot seat basically. So if I'm Morgan Moses and I say, okay, yeah, the Jets were 2-14 last year. I don't know how many expectations there are. It's all gravy. Let's see what we can go put together because I do think, obviously I'm not as familiar with the Jets probably as you are. But, from my understanding, that offense has gotten a lot better. Mekhi Becton is a stud at left tackle. So I would go join Elijah Vera Tucker. I would go join a stud offensive line and see what we can put together. Maybe it becomes a long-term deal with the Jets if they like what Morgan's got. Whereas I think the Bears just have a lot more uncertainty in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, it seems like both Pace and Nagy are on the hot seat. So if they get fired by week 4, most like, what the hell am I doing here? So that very much could absolutely be a factor. So let's shut down this because I've heard since Moses has signed, and really it's been reported for a while that there was interest on both sides. that there's been a lot of fans saying, "Oh, phenomenal! Now Moses can slide into guard," and they're playing like Madden among the fans. I'm like, guys, what are we talking about here? This is ridiculous. Of course, Moses is going to plug right in there to right tackle, and it's interesting coming off the Chicago conversation because I'm not sure if it was the Jeremy Fowler report or someone else on Bears Jets. One of the reasons apparently Moses was kind of leaning Jets is Jets wanted him at right tackle. Bears potentially wanted him at left tackle. So can we shut down all the rumors of Fant potentially moving to some other position? It seems like Fant has been a right tackle his entire career. Seems like a pretty good place to keep him.
Yeah, I would not imagine that Morgan Moses would sign there thinking they're going to move me to guard. He is the left tackle, right tackle consideration was certainly a thing. I don't know Robert Saleh. I don't know the New York Jets offensive line coach personally, but I would imagine that Morgan Moses signed there with a pretty strong indicator. Hey, you might compete with George Fant, or you're the starting right tackle, or you will come into camp as starting right tackle. It's very hard to me to imagine Morgan Moses playing guard. Not impossible, but hard to imagine.
No, and that's fair. So who is Morgan Moses? Because there's been some fan base saying, so we explained really why Washington decided to move on and save some money, but there's some Jet fans saying, so some guy got cut and the Jets pick him up and all of a sudden, like, we're going all kind of crazy here. So who is Moses? What is his strengths? What are any weaknesses perceived, whether injury or something with his game? Who is Morgan Moses?
Yeah, I think Morgan Moses is really a stalwart right tackle. I mean, he has been that guy. He's played 97 straight games. I think that's the number that you need to know. He will play through injury. I think there are sometimes it limits his effectiveness, but he will always be out there. I think really, so last December, I did a story with him about what it takes for him to get prepared on a week-to-week basis. And that's the sort of guy who invested in his house to the point where, he put 30 yards of artificial turf in his basement. He put an infrared sauna. He put an entire NFL caliber weight room. Like when COVID was going on last year, Morgan would have the entire offensive line and some other players he played with, throughout his career over to work out at his house because his house was the closest thing you could get to an NFL caliber strength and training room. So, I think sometimes Morgan can maybe get himself in trouble wanting to play through injuries and being a tough guy, but at the same time, you have to admire, at least from the press box, I always admired his heart. I always admired his preparation. When the offensive line wasn't playing well, he would get after guys and say, to a man, hey, we're better than this. We're playing better than this. We need to protect our quarterback. Especially, I remember Alex Smith came in week 5 against the Los Angeles Rams. I think he was sacked 5 times. And on one of them, this is his first game back from a devastating leg injury. Aaron Donald literally jumped on his back, and everyone in the press box gasped, oh my God, like I hope his leg will hold up. But I remember I think it was later in that game, Morgan Moses really went after the offensive lineman and said, hey, we need to play better. We are better than this. And so I think that's the kind of guy that the Jets fans are getting in Morgan Moses.
And just a little bit more on that person. That's a great story. So again, from a leadership standpoint, from a locker room standpoint, that seems to be a big thing with Saleh and Joe Douglas as they've been bringing guys into the locker room. They don't just want talented players. There are plenty of those, but they want guys that fit the culture of what they're trying to build. Joe Douglas did the big bravado statement, said, I want the best culture in all of sports. And there's a long way to go to get there. But is Morgan Moses a plus in that conversation?
Yeah, I think so. And certainly in the locker room and on the field, he will take care of his business. It's hard to know, how these guys interact with their teammates off the field. I think it's a little bit hard sometimes to know that. But people have said nothing but glowing things. Brandon Sheriff, the all-pro right guard who's been next to him for 6 years, really spoke highly of Morgan and said, I'll always love that guy. That could be just teammate pandering. But at the same time, I think Brandon Sheriff wouldn't really say that he's the type of guy, he's an Iowa guy. He says what he means. And I think that's where he's at. So that's my understanding.
Sam, last one before we get you out of here. And thank you so much for taking the time. Jet fans are going to really dig this. So I've mentioned Jet fans are stoked. They are popping the bubble. They're like Super Bowl. They're going wild out here, man. It's crazy. So let me ask you, from your perspective, the Jets picking up Morgan Moses, how big of a deal should it be? Should Jet fans be going wild? Should they be going crazy? And how big of an addition is it from your perspective, adding a guy like Morgan Moses here in late June?
I appreciate the enthusiasm. I don't think any team is ever a right tackle away from the Super Bowl. Zach Wilson, having a potential franchise quarterback in the locker room, I think that is a huge deal. And I think how far the Jets can go is probably heavily heavily based on how he performs. So if you can keep him upright with Morgan Moses and you can get him used to the NFL game, if you can not do what was done to Darnold, I think that obviously is a plus. So Morgan Moses is I think an important piece in that puzzle, but by far away not the biggest piece.
All right, Sam, you're one of the best in the business, man. Thank you for jumping back here in Syracuse. We appreciate it, man. And great work breaking the story, man. And I hope we can chat again in the future. This was a lot of fun.
Of course. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.